The night my son's girlfriend called me an embarrassment. I was standing in the doorway of the fanciest restaurant I'd ever set foot in, still wearing the jacket I'd driven 4 hours in. I almost turned around and walked back to my truck. I should have. That's what part of me screamed. Just go. Just leave. Let them have their evening without you ruining the atmosphere. But my son Daniel was already moving toward me through the crowd, and when he reached me, he grabbed my arm, leaned close to my ear, and said 5 words so quietly I almost didn't catch them. Dad, don't react. Trust me. I didn't understand what he meant. Not then. You don't now. My name is Eugene Harlow. I'm 63 years old. I've been a plumber for 38 years, not the kind who shows up in a clean van and hands you a laminated price sheet. The kind who crawls under houses in August, who thaws frozen pipes at 2 in the morning in January, who knows every hardware store in a 50-mile radius on a first-name basis. I built a small company, Harlow & Sons Plumbing, with my own hands and my own credit and more early mornings than I can count. My wife Patricia passed 6 years ago. Ovarian cancer. She was 54. We had 29 years together, and I will tell you plainly that not a single day has gone by since that I haven't reached for the phone to tell her something before remembering. You never stop reaching. You just learn to live with the reaching. After she passed, I kept the business going. Hired 2 more guys, bought a second truck, expanded into HVAC. Daniel helped on weekends through high school, learned the trade the same way I did on his knees, hands in walls, learning what holds a house together from the inside out. He was good at it too, better than me, honestly, had a feel for it. But Daniel had a mind for numbers alongside the mechanical instinct, so I encouraged him to go to school for business. He graduated, came back, and together we turned a 2-truck operation into something real. We had a good rhythm, he and I. Coffee every morning at my kitchen table. He'd bring the laptop and go over the books. I'd cook eggs. We talked about everything and nothing. 16 employees by the time he was 28. And then Daniel met Vanessa Caldwell at some charity fundraiser her firm sponsored. I want to be fair. When he first brought her to the house, I tried. I made pot roast Patricia's recipe. I cleaned the living room, put on a button-down shirt, made sure the bathroom was spotless. Vanessa walked in wearing heels that cost more than my first truck payment and looked around my kitchen the way a health inspector looks around a restaurant kitchen. She was polite enough that evening, politely distant, politely curious in a way that felt more like inventory than interest. So this is where Daniel grew up, she said, touching the edge of my kitchen table with one finger. 31 years in this house, I said. She smiled the way people smile when they're trying to think of something to say. Daniel noticed, but said nothing. He was in that early phase where you're still hoping the 2 worlds will find a way to meet each other halfway. I've been there. I remembered it, so I gave them space. The question started the following spring. About 8 months into their relationship. I'd pick up passing things Daniel mentioned, Vanessa asking whether the business was incorporated, whether I had a financial advisor, whether I'd ever thought about what would happen to the company when I retired. I didn't think much of it at first. These seemed like reasonable questions from a woman with a business background. But then her father got involved. Richard Caldwell was a commercial real estate developer. He had the handshake of a man who had been practicing handshakes his whole life. Firm, two-handed, sustained just a beat too long. He drove a silver Mercedes, wore a watch that probably cost more than my house, and had the particular confidence of someone who had never once in his adult life been told no by anyone who mattered to him. He invited me to lunch. Just the 2 of us, man to man, he said. I thought it was a nice gesture, getting to know the father of the woman his son was serious about. He ordered a bottle of wine I couldn't pronounce, and then spent the first 20 minutes asking about the business in a way that felt less like conversation and more like a deposition. How many employees? What the annual revenue looked like? Whether I owned the building or leased? Whether I had life insurance? Whether I had a will in place? I'm 62 years old, I said, keeping my voice even. I'm in good health. I've got time to sort all that out. He smiled, that practice smile. Of course, of course. Just thinking about Daniel's future, and Vanessa's. They're serious about each other. It's natural to think about what that future looks like. I drove home with an uncomfortable feeling I couldn't fully name yet. Like when you're running water and something in the pressure feels off, nothing you can point to. Just something in the system that isn't quite right. I mentioned it to Daniel over coffee the next morning. Not accusatorially, just mentioned it. He listened without looking up from his laptop. Then he said, I know, Dad. 2 words. The same quiet steadiness he always had. I wanted to ask more, but something in his tone stopped me. He wasn't dismissing me. He wasn't brushing it off. It was more like he was telling me, I see it too, and I'm already thinking about it. So I let it go. Vanessa and Daniel got engaged the following October. He proposed at a restaurant in the city. She posted the ring on social media before they'd even left the table. I saw it because Daniel texted me a photo, not because I follow any of that. The ring was significant. I didn't ask what it cost. The engagement party was her family's production entirely. Her parents rented out the private dining room of a hotel downtown, the kind of hotel with a doorman and a name that gets mentioned in travel magazines. I'd been told it was business casual, which in my world means khakis and a collared shirt, which is exactly what I wore. I drove the 4 hours from my house. I hadn't been able to get the truck detailed before the trip. We'd had a burst pipe emergency the day before, and I'd worked until midnight. I washed up, changed, and drove. I arrived 37 minutes late because the parking structure confused me. Daniel was standing near the bar when I walked in, and across the room I saw Vanessa in a deep green dress, laughing at something her mother had said. She turned her head, saw me in the doorway, and her expression shifted in a way she didn't bother to hide. She said it just loud enough for the people around her to hear. "Oh great, the plumber is here." She said it with a little laugh, like it was a joke. But the kind of joke that's only a joke if everyone agrees to pretend it is. A few people near her smiled uncertainly. Someone looked at the floor. My throat tightened. My face went hot. 38 years of work, of providing, of building something real with my hands, and I was a punchline in a hotel ballroom. I turned toward the door, and Daniel was already there. He took my arm, not harshly, gently, the way you guide someone who's about to step on something they can't see. He bent close and said those 5 words. "Dad, don't react. Trust me." I looked at him. His face was calm. Not embarrassed, not apologetic, not performing calm for the benefit of the room. Genuinely, quietly calm, like a man who has already done the math on a situation and knows how it ends. "Okay," I said, and I stayed. The dinner was long. I sat at the far end of the table from Richard and his wife Margaret. Vanessa circulated, gracious and shining, the way people are when they know every eye is on them. She kissed my cheek when she passed me and called me Eugene, not Mr. Harlow, which I'd never insisted on, but also not the nothing that the plumber comment had made me feel like. Richard sat across from me for part of the evening and returned to the subject of the business. He had a new angle this time. "Daniel mentioned you might be thinking about bringing in outside management," he said, "to take some of the operational load off you." "Daniel mentioned that?" I said. "Something along those lines. As the company scales, it makes sense to professionalize the structure. I have contacts some very capable people who've worked with companies like yours and taken them to the next level." I looked down the table at Daniel, who was in conversation with Vanessa's aunt. He wasn't looking at me. "I appreciate that," I said to Richard. "We're doing well as we are." Of course. He refilled my glass without asking. Just thinking about the long game. I went home that night with the uncomfortable feeling upgraded to something that had a shape now. Something deliberate, something patient. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have known then, was that Daniel had already been thinking about it for 6 months. The following week, I found a letter on my kitchen table. I hadn't heard Daniel come in. He still had a key. Still came by in the mornings sometime. But that morning, he'd come and gone without waking me, and left an envelope with my name on it in his handwriting. Inside was a single folded piece of paper. "Dad, I know what you're worried about. I've known for a while. I need you to trust me a little longer. I have it handled. Don't sign anything. Don't agree to anything. Don't change anything with the business until we talk. I mean anything, Dad. I love you, Daniel." I sat at my kitchen table for a long time with that letter. Then I poured myself a cup of coffee and I waited. What followed over the next 2 months was something I was only partially aware of as it happened, and only fully understood after the fact. Daniel, I would later learn, had begun quietly documenting. He'd gone back through every conversation he'd had with Vanessa and her father that touched on finances or the business. He'd recorded phone calls legally under the one-party consent laws of our state. He'd had a private attorney review everything. He'd been building something the way only a patient man builds something carefully, without rushing, without tipping his hand. What he'd found was a plan. Richard Caldwell, through a holding company with a name designed to obscure its connection to him, had been positioning to make a move on 3 small trade businesses in the region, businesses like mine, with long-established customer bases and real estate assets attached. The strategy, as Daniel's attorney laid it out to me later, was elegant in the way predatory things are elegant. Marry into the business, establish influence, maneuver the aging owner into a position of dependency, then leverage a health scare or retirement to acquire controlling interest at below market value. They'd chosen us because I was a widower without other family nearby, because the business was valuable but not large enough to have sophisticated legal protections, because I was, to use the word Richard had used to someone on one of those recorded calls, manageable. That word. I've thought about that word more than any other word I've heard in 63 years. Daniel sat across from me at my kitchen table on a Tuesday morning and laid all of it out. The recordings, the documents, the attorney's analysis. A paper trail that took Richard Caldwell from polite future father-in-law to calculated predator in about 40 pages of documentation. I looked at my son for a long time when he finished. "How long have you known?" I asked. "I suspected within 2 months of meeting her," he said. "I didn't want to be wrong, so I made sure I was right before I told you." "And Vanessa?" I said. "Does she know what her father is doing?" Daniel was quiet for a moment. That quiet, that meant he'd thought about this longer than I had. "She knows enough," he said. I didn't push further. I didn't need to. The engagement ended 11 days later. Daniel handled it. I wasn't there. He told me only that it was done, that it was not a pleasant conversation, and that Vanessa's father had called him afterward and threatened in general terms to make things difficult. Daniel had calmly informed him that the recordings and documentation were with an attorney and that any action taken against Harlow and Sons or its principals would result in their immediate release to the relevant parties. Richard Caldwell did not call again. I want to tell you that I handled all of this with dignity and maturity, and that I never once felt the particular grief of watching your child absorb a hurt that was partly about you. But that would be dishonest. There were days in that stretch where I drove past the shop at 6 in the morning just to see the lights come on, just to remind myself it was still there. Still mine, still ours. Patricia's voice, or the memory of it, kept showing up in those early mornings. She had a thing she used to say when I was worried about something and couldn't articulate why. "If it feels wrong in your hands, it's probably wrong." Plumber's wisdom, she called it, though she'd never held a pipe wrench in her life. She was right, as she usually was. Something in the handshake had felt wrong. Something in the way Richard refilled my glass without asking. Sometimes the body knows before the mind catches up. The business is doing well. We brought in a new account this past spring, a regional school district contract, 3 years, renewable. Daniel handles the commercial side now with a confidence I watch with something I can only describe as pride so physical it has a location in my chest. We still have coffee in the morning when he comes by. He still brings the laptop. He's seeing someone new. Her name is Joanna. She grew up on a dairy farm in Vermont, and her father is an electrician. And the first time she came to dinner, she rolled her sleeves up and asked if she could help with the dishes. I had to excuse myself to the garage for a minute because I didn't want Daniel to see my face. Last week, Daniel asked me something I hadn't expected. "Did you ever doubt me?" he said, during all of it. "Did you wonder if I was wrong?" We were standing in the driveway. The sun was doing that early evening thing where it goes sideways through the oak trees and turns everything amber. "Every day," I said honestly. "But I trusted you anyway." He nodded slowly, looked at the ground. "That's all I needed," he said. "That's the thing about raising a child for 28 years. You pour yourself into them, your work ethic, your honesty, your way of showing up, your way of not running from hard things. And then one day the situation reverses so quietly you almost don't notice it happening, and they are the ones pouring something into you. Steadiness, certainty, a hand on your arm in a hotel doorway that says, 'I see it, I've got it, trust me.' What I know at 63 that I didn't know at 30 is that trust is not naivety. Naivety is trusting without evidence. Trust is what you extend to someone who has already given you 1,000 small reasons to believe in them, and choosing to believe anyway when things get hard. Daniel gave me those reasons for 28 years. I just had to remember them when it counted. There's a photo on my workbench that Patricia took the year Daniel was about 12. He's under a sink with me, one of the early times I brought him along on a service call. He's got a look of complete concentration on his face, watching what I'm doing with the pipe wrench, absorbing it. He didn't know the photo was being taken. Neither did I. I look at it sometimes when I'm opening up in the morning. I have never been ashamed of this work. I have never been ashamed of the truck, or the hours, or the smell of a long day that follows you home. I built something honest. I raised someone honest. And when someone tried to use that against me, my own son had already been standing in the way. That's more than most men get. Before you go, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from right now, and what time of day is it where you are? Drop it in the comments below. And if this story meant something to you, if you have a parent or a child you'd trust the same way, I'd like to hear about that too. There's more to come. Stay with us.